Hello, everyone. I'm waiting a couple minutes or a couple seconds just to make sure that the live has caught up with me. Hi, welcome. My name is Anna Gregoire, and I'm the performance coordinator at Munroe Saturday Nights. For those of you who don't know us, welcome. Munroe Saturday Nights is a program at Munroe Center for the Arts in Lexington. We strive to bring a stage to local artists and to make performances accessible to everyone. I want to thank everyone who donated this evening. It's donations like yours that make it possible for us to keep bringing these performances to you, and certainly what's made it possible for us to keep doing these during the pandemic. So thank you so much. Our next performance, if you're interested, is going to be May 8th. It's also going to be online at 7:30, and it is a play reading called A Revolutionary Encounter in London. It's a one-act play by our local playwright Debbie Weiss about the astounding little-known meeting of enslaved African-American poet Phyllis Wheatley and American founding father Benjamin Franklin, and their meeting that took place in 1770s London. It's really interesting. Debbie Weiss grew up in Lexington. She's a really fantastic playwright. We actually did a 10-minute play of hers last June. It was the first virtual performance that MSN did, and it's still up on our website. So if you want to go take a look at her work or register for our next event, you can go look at those on munroecenter.org. We're really excited about our performance tonight. It's a little different from what we've done, so I'm very excited about it. I'm excited that you've all joined us and that we're able to host this roundtable talk. I'm going to introduce to you our wonderful panelists. I'm going to give you a shortened version of their bio, but once they're up and talking, I will put their full bio in the chat so you can read about them. And if you want to find out more about them, they're also up on our website. Wonderful. I'm going to start us out with John Dreyer. This is John Dreyer, everyone. John has worked as a software engineer, a math teacher, and currently as a math tutor and as a jazz and classical musician. As a double bassist, he has performed with NEA jazz masters Dave Liebman and Sheila Jordan. As a cellist, he performed with the Boston Philharmonic and Kennedy Center Opera House Orchestra and many others. So that's John. Welcome, John. Our next panelist is Tracy Kim Horn. Welcome, Tracy. Tracy studied pastry at Le Cordon Bleu in Paris, wine through UK-based Wine and Spirit Education Trust, and engineering at Dartmouth College. She was an assistant pastry chef at the now closed Hammersley Bistro in Boston South End, and she runs Parfait, which is a next-generation ice cream truck started in 2018 in Lexington, so you might have been there. Next, we have Bill Mazza. Bill is a professor of creativity, creative director, art director, designer with extensive experience in unconventional creative marketing, promotional advertising, art direction, and design. So welcome, Bill. And then we have Dave Weisberg. Dave is a design professional with years of experience developing delightful and useful products and services across a range of industries. Dave spent 22 years in the Boston studio of internationally acclaimed IDEO, where he evolved from a designer of mechanical devices to a designer of human experiences. And our final panelist and special guest is Dr. Joon-Ki Kim. He received a PhD degree in computer science from Columbia University in 1973. He worked at Samsung Display Design, now SDI, to help their tablet and touch panel effort. After establishing the touch panel business at SDI, he moved to Samsung Electronics. His interest in creativity resulted in serving as director of American Creativity Association and writing a book on creativity in Korean for the youth of Korea. So those to unmute them so that we can hear what they want to say this evening. And I'm going to start them out with a couple questions. And after I've given them a couple minutes to answer these questions, I'm going to open it up to the audience. So if you have any questions that you want to ask, feel free to type your questions in the comments, and I will pick them out and ask them from the panelists. The first question that I'm going to start with everyone, and I think I'm going to start with John, is how has creativity played a role in your life? And have you always thought of yourself as creative?
The second question, yes.
Great.
Yeah, I guess you've seen from my resume, I'm kind of a professional dilettante. I do a lot of things, a lot of STEM stuff that is generally considered not creative, and a lot of music that is generally considered creative. But I kind of feel like it's all about creativity, and that the best people in every one of those fields, and probably all the other ones, are creative. They have a lot in common. Music, computer science, math, they all require a lot of diligent work, sort of with curiosity as you go, but a lot of repetition. And then after that, well, Charlie Parker said it best. Charlie Parker, I wrote down this quote because I love it so much. I'll try to get it exactly right. He says, you've got to learn your instrument, then you practice, practice, practice. And then when you finally get up there on the bandstand, forget all that and just wail. So I don't really think he meant to forget it entirely. It's still there. Everything you've learned from the hard work is still there, and it's internalized. And that allows, when you let yourself free, to let your creativity come on out. There's an example from math that I like to use. When I was getting to become an educator, which was sort of in midlife, it had been a long time since high school math, college math, all that kind of stuff. And this is just one simple thing. Everybody who goes to high school knows that all the angles in a triangle add up to 180 degrees. I didn't know why. And it's okay. And a lot of people just accept it as sort of orthodoxy, and they just say it's something I have to learn in math. But I started playing with triangles, and I'll show you. I'll see if I can share this and see if you see it. Hold on, if I get the technology right. So there it is. So I started playing with triangles. 3 points, line, 3 angles. I just sort of looked at it for a while. I started drawing all sorts of lines on it and all sorts of things, circles, I think. And then all of a sudden, and I really don't know what happened. I don't know why this happened. I thought about drawing this line parallel to the base, or one of the sides of the triangle. And then it just sort of popped out. And if you don't really see it yet, here are some clues. Look at the red angles, look at the green angles, and all of a sudden, magic.
I know.
180 degrees. This is something that has been discovered zillions of times by zillions of people. I can take it off. And so it was there to be discovered all along. Euclid had a similar proof. I looked it up. It wasn't exactly the same. But still, the discovery takes some creativity. You have to just go places that your instincts take you to. one of the big differences I find between the creativity in math, computer science on one side, and music, and presumably the other arts on the other, is the level of error, or the level of variation from what you think are the rules, and how that goes. Herbie Hancock tells this great story. He started working with Miles Davis, and he was still relatively unknown. Miles was famous. He was intimidating. He was flustered. He played a wrong chord. And Miles, instead of giving him the kind of famous dirty look he sometimes had, he played a different note, intentionally making the wrong chord right. And it must have been a beautiful moment for Herbie Hancock. It's a combination of artistic beauty and forgiveness that I can't imagine experiencing. But on the other hand, on the other side of it, there's the story of the Mars Climate Orbiter, which was about a $350 million robotic satellite that was supposed to orbit Mars, but it never did, because one part of the software was working in English units, one part of the software was working in metric units, and nobody thought to write the one line of code to multiply by the conversion factor. And so nobody knows if it crashed or if it just zoomed out of orbit entirely. So the difference, I think, is not that one is more creative than the other, but the creativity is a little more constrained in STEM. You're channeling your creativity through narrower pathways. And can I just say one more thing about
of course,
the value of curiosity as an engine of creativity? Einstein once said this quote that I love a lot. I have no special talent. I'm only passionately curious. And this was a magnificent hyperbole. I'm sure he was incredibly talented, but what may have made him Einstein instead of just a generic brilliant person was that curiosity. And I stole part of that quote for the name of my tutoring business. But curiosity is also part of the arts. And so Charlie Parker had the curiosity about playing all the notes you don't normally play in the chords, the notes on the tops of the chords that aren't usually played. And even just simple stuff with music theory about why, when you play a tonic chord, do you want to hear when you play a dominant, why do you want to hear the tonic? And why, if instead you hear the relative minor, why does that leave you hanging? Thank you.
Thank you. That was really interesting. It reminded me, I'm an actress myself. And one of the first things that you sort of have to learn is you have to have your lines memorized. You must have your lines memorized. And then you get on stage and anything can happen. I'm going to move on now to Tracy Kim Horn. I'm going to ask you the same questions. How has creativity played a role in your life? And have you always thought of yourself as creative?
So when I think about creativity in my life, I feel like the first time I really remember ever being called creative was after graduating from college. And I think the word other people might have meant to use rather than calling me creative was either adventurous or irresponsible, but they were very generous and they called me creative. Most of my friends from college, when we graduated, took careers in management consulting or in finance. I took an hourly job as a third pastry cook at a Boston hotel. The highlight for me was working at the crepe station, at the Saturday chocolate bar, and also at Sunday brunch. And that was, it was following a passion of mine that I didn't really know that I had. It's not like I grew up my whole life thinking I wanted to be a pastry chef. It was just something that I had discovered in college and felt the need to pursue. And it was just something that I wasn't really willing to let go. And it was something that was burning inside of me that I had to do now. And I wasn't willing to wait and do it later. So, I think that was creative to a lot of people because it was not their path and it was not the track that they were on. But really what I did was I feel like I just stepped off of one set of tracks and I jumped onto another set of tracks where there were tons of people, who have been working in the restaurant industry, and that was their path. And so it wasn't necessarily creative. It was just more taking that leap of faith and going from one path to another. That said, as I did progress in the culinary world, molecular gastronomy was a new thing, and that to me was the pinnacle of creativity, and that was what was so exciting and so interesting and what kept my interest in the field. While I was doing the practice, and I was making the most basic of croissant dough and bread every day and those desserts, that's what my work was. But my eye was always on what was going on in Europe. What was Fran Adria doing? What was and then it became Thomas Keller, who I then got to work with out in California. But that was, to me, where I guess my appetite for creativity really got filled. And that's what was so exciting. So fast forward a decade plus, lots of things happened, life happens. But for me today, creativity is starting a new business, and not just a business that's been done before, but a new kind of business. Parfait is what I like to call a next generation ice cream truck, where everything we do is from scratch, all natural, local ingredients. Those are all terms I'm sure many of you have heard before, but usually not in the context of dessert and ice cream truck. And so it's putting those two concepts together, or maybe it was three, I don't know, I lost count, but trying to do that. And then now actually in this COVID world, trying to figure out how to open up also a brick and mortar, just in an environment that I think we're all still trying to figure out, especially for the world of retail and for food. So that's what creativity, I guess, means to me today, is trying to figure out both how to do the business side of it, and then also how to craft a menu that to me is creative work, because I am trying to balance what people expect, what children expect when they see a sweet shop and they hear that it has popsicles. They want strawberry. I love strawberry, so we'll have strawberry there. But to me, making strawberry popsicles every single day isn't necessarily the most fulfilling thing in the world because it's so predictable. So I want to do those new flavor combinations like blueberry ginger or 5-spice chocolate. And I just want to add something different that just is a little bit more exciting and also keeps the more adventurous eaters who frankly drive a lot of the media and the press and the interest in the keeping your business relevant, and they attract that attention. And so it's trying to balance those two and creating a menu and a business and an experience that does all of that. So I guess that's the role that I feel like creativity plays in my life. But if you're asking if I've always thought of myself as creative, the answer is absolutely not. I feel like I always really wanted to do well in school. And I believe that school did not reward creativity. In fact, it sort of stifled it, because we have this factory-based education system where you take everybody and you take their born-on date, you batch them into a group and you stick them through, and they kind of go through this assembly line. And if you're creative and you stick out, that's, at least in the school that I went to, which was public school in just outside of New York City, it was frowned upon, and that those were the kids who acted out or who weren't doing well by traditional standards. So I feel like I learned how to draw really well inside of the lines because that's what was rewarded. And the moment those lines were taken away from me, I felt totally lost, and I didn't know what to do. I think it was just when I graduated from Dartmouth that all of a sudden I felt like I couldn't do what everybody else was doing. And so if those were the lines that I had to color within, all of a sudden I just felt unable to do it. And so that's when I just jumped onto a different set of tracks and followed a different path where I did feel like I could color within the lines. And it wasn't actually until, and this part I think might have gotten left out of my bio, but I spent about 3 years in Silicon Valley helping some friends with a startup. And it had nothing to do with food. It was in mobile advertising, and it was a field I knew nothing about. But it was something about seeing these two people who also honestly didn't know a lot about mobile advertising have the courage to start a business in that space that then gave me the courage to finally take all of my experience and my passions and to turn that into what is now Parfait, and to strike out on my own and to try to build something myself. So thank you. Thanks for the opportunity to be here tonight.
Thank you. I was so excited when you joined, because I think cooking is so creative. It's something I love to do, but I'm not really a recipe person. I kind of like making things up, but I am not a chef. I am not trained to do that. So I think it's wildly creative what you do. I am going to move on to Bill Maza.
Yes.
And I'm going to ask you the same thing. I would like to know, how has creativity played a role in your life? And have you always thought of yourself as creative?
Well, I thought I was normal at one point in life. And my father, who was, I grew up in Lexington, and my father was a defense intelligence man. He came out of MIT and Draper, and he was somebody that we just couldn't really relate to sometimes in the house. My mother was an artist. She was a painter. And funny enough, I think that I discovered that I was kind of weird, maybe, is when I tried to imagine my father doing a still life painting and my mother designing a defense system. And I said to myself, wow, this is kind of crazy. This ain't gonna happen. And then I started figuring out things, looking at things differently. Maybe looking at things like, if the house was a fruit, what fruit would it be? And these simple things like that. So at that point, then I went on to art school at New England School of Art and at the MFA. And then I really started finding out that there's a lot of other crazy people out there like me. And I sort of liked it. And that's where I kind of found my niche of what I really want to do with life. Doing that, I became an art director and I became a creative director. I moved to Europe, in Italy. And I spent 38 years in Italy. And I've been teaching creative thinking there at the European Institute of Design and other places. And it was just amazing. I thought that, that was, my life became that, actually, a lot of it. I'm working professionally as a designer and a creative director for, companies, fashion companies, Salvatore Ferragamo and stuff like that. And also doing this on the side. And then what happened at a certain point, it became so much more interesting when you're looking at kids out there, university kids, and they go, I get it. And they start connecting. And that's sort of like a goosebump thing that, it just remains with you. And I loved it from that day on, education. Now I'm involved in teaching online, creative thinking in China, actually. And it's the most amazing thing that I sometimes don't even know who the teacher is, because it's so intercultural. You're talking with things like that. And I'm having a really great time doing it. So that's how I realized I was creative, when my mother and father were doing these weird things. And that's the spark of the whole thing for me. It's definitely part of my life. It's how I live like this now. And so, but education is really what I like to do the best now, teach it.
That's amazing. Thank you. I'm gonna come back to that later, because I think the idea of teaching creativity is really exciting. I'm going to move on to Dave. I'm going to ask you the same things. I'm going to say, how has creativity played a role in your life? And have you always thought of yourself as creative?
Great, thanks. It's a good question, and it's actually made me sort of think about it. I had a few days to think about it, and so I've always thought of myself as creative. As a kid, everyone told me I was creative. My mother tells this story. I feel like I remember it, but it's really the story I remember of picking up a piece of wood in the yard or near the neighborhood, and I carried it around. I put a dot on the piece of wood, and it was a duck. Like, I saw a duck in the piece of wood. And so I think visually I've always been able to, or believed I could, and therefore one can, see patterns and see relationships. So visually I could draw things fairly well. And so the visual arts and all of making stuff, building things, played a big role in my life as a kid, and I got a lot of support for it. Whether it was in school or making big weird costumes at home. I got to go to like sort of a citywide art thing on Saturdays, so I got a lot of support for that. I did very well, in sort of all the other academics too. So I didn't feel like school was stifling my creativity. Although, Tracy, you're right. I don't feel like all the parts of school foster creativity. Like, it's like that's for art, and then there's math and science. So I think that's interesting. But I think in the sciences, as John was pointing out, like when you see things differently, that sort of innovation of looking at things is where creativity or pattern seeing, visual arts sort of crosses over. So when I was, a kid, all the way up to high school, I played saxophone too. That was creative, although I never transitioned to being a great improvisational jazz player because I didn't learn all my chords. You got to learn those things, and even if you feel it, it sounds kind of clanky. But so then I went to MIT, and I was going to be an architect. Somebody talked me out of that. I became a mechanical engineer. There's a lot of design and a lot of creativity in mechanical engineering, but the difference is when you're drawing stuff, which is sort of for you. It's for me. I was drawing stuff because I thought that'd be cool. I'll draw that. And like, wow, that's cool. When you are making things and building things for a purpose, for a client, let's just say, or to make sure it works, like, and it needs to work in the world, like the application or the idea of creativity feels a little different. It's not just like about I'm going to express myself. It's like, there's an answer here. Now, there might be a lot of answers, but there's a lot of wrong answers too. And so when you flip over from the creative arts to the applied arts or the industrial arts, which is industrial design, mechanical engineering, product design, graphic design, like there's an answer, and there's a lot of range for the answer. But if you create a bad answer, like people look at it and go, that doesn't do the job it was hired to do, to use Clayton Christensen's, like that's bad design. Now there's bad art, but it's like, I don't care. That was for me. If you don't like it, fine. But bad design it's kind of like, well, okay, you wasted my time, you wasted the space on the wall, you wasted the product on the shelf, and that factory, and these are going into a landfill a little too early. And so now I'm creating in the world. So creativity for me, like my job is creativity. People come to me and they say, we have a problem with our client needs this thing and they're having problems with this. Can you figure out how to solve that? There's a lot of creativity there. And there's a lot of pressure to be right though. And so that's the thing I balance. And actually I leverage process. I leverage process and people who have studied their chords, and like people who are really good, so that they can then think creatively because they're on stage and they don't have to think about the chords anymore. It flows. Their ideas flow from the right foundation. So so I'll just leave it there. I do think that there are two sides of creativity, and I've sort of lived them both.
I think that's so interesting. I think we've all talked previously, and I think one of the things we sort of talked about was the different sides of creativity, even within like the fine arts. I went to a drama school, and some of my classmates were really good at improvising, and some of them were really good at making the sets, and there were people like me who were sort of a different kind of creative, but I was the one that would also go, okay, well, we need a producer, we need a place to put this on, we need, and you need all different sides of those creatives to make things run. I'm going to ask the same question to our special guest, and I realized that I completely failed to tell the audience one of the exciting things is that Dr. Junki Kim is Tracy Kimhorn's father. So we have some intergenerational creativity going on right now, which I think is really exciting. So Junki, I would love to ask you how creativity played a role in your life. And have you always thought of yourself as creative?
I have not I did not think about creativity when I was growing up, or even as an adult. But when I was at school, I really had very good friends because they were always different. So I was usually alone or played with very few people, even through high school. And when I got my job, I found people who are like me, different from people out of the street. And I liked it. And when I progressed to hire people, I was asking them questions to see if they are able to work with me, making new things. I didn't use the word creativity or create at the time. But then one of our friends suggested that what you're looking for is a creative people. It's the creativity that you're interested that you don't know, and introduced me to a book, which opened a whole new set of world. So I spent about 3 years studying creativity. And that's it. That's something that I've been trying to live as a creative person, but I had difficulty with the world around me, which was not creative, and I was not really accepted by them. So I think I can stop here for now.
Okay, thank you. That's amazing. I think something so interesting about some of these answers has been that the world around you wasn't creative. And I think a lot of the parents that come into our art center bring their kids to us because they really want their kids to be creative and experience creativity, but they don't feel like they are creative themselves. With that in mind, lovely audience, if you have any questions that you would like to ask the panelists, please feel free to put them in the chat and I will pull them out as we go. I think I'm going to skip over one of the questions I had thought of because we sort of started to talk about this, and I'm going to ask you all, maybe I'll start with you, Tracy, because you were the first person to sort of talk about it. But I wanted to talk a little bit more about was creativity nurtured in your childhood? Because I think, you sort of said you felt like school wasn't, but I think that was something everyone sort of touched on a little bit.
Since I'm going to be following up on my dad, I'll start with my home life and then I'll move to school. Yeah. I would say that something about my upbringing that was very noticeable to me growing up was that my dad is religious about his routine and his schedule. And so, he was always up at the same time. He always did his same exercises in the morning. He was always waiting for me in the car to drive me to school at a certain time. He came home, he laid down on the couch, we had dinner. There was this very, very strict routine. And what I didn't understand as a child was that I think that he had those things in place so that from the hours that he walked into his office until the hour that he left, he could be creative. And he didn't waste his time outside of the office getting decision fatigue. I remember there was, I think, like a Vanity Fair article back when Obama was president that talked about how he had like 2 suits, or maybe it was just 2 ties or something like that. So he never had to choose. And I see that in my own life as a parent. I think that's been the most exhausting part, is how many decisions I have to make every single day, not just about myself, but about my children. And it's exhausting, and I'm just tired by the end of it. And so now I can reflect back and think that my dad, I think, was able to do that innovative work that he did, looking forward, at technology 20 years from now, or I guess he was looking at where we are today, back when he, 20 years ago, because he had instituted all of these very rigid routines so that he didn't have to think about so much when he was at home. Adding to that, my mom is an artist, or was trained as an artist. She taught a number of things, art and computers. And I think that growing up with my mom, I could never just hand in a project. It always had to be beautiful. It could be the most simple book report, and I had to put a beautiful cover on it, and I had to bind it in some special way. And so I think for my dad, I got the rigid routine, and so that I had more hours in which I could be creative. And then for my mom, I got this push to always make things better and always make things look better, and to spend time, because that mattered. And then if I take that to school, was creativity nurtured at school? Dave, I completely agree. I think creativity was that's for art and music, but there's no space for that in any of the other subjects. And that's probably not fair. I'm sure, writing, you were told to write a story and there's creative writing, but I think that's where I would totally freeze up, because it was I don't think we were necessarily taught how to do the creative writing. It was sort of okay, here's grammar, and here we're going to analyze this piece of literature, and now suddenly go write. And I feel like there was some missing steps. And I hope, and I'm hopeful, that those steps have since been filled in. We're having this conversation here today. I think it, is part of a larger conversation that's happening in our society about the value of creative education, especially given the knowledge economy that we're trying to prepare the next generation for. So I think that creativity was nurtured in my childhood, but that was a mostly at home thing. And I'm not going to say that all schools were like that, but that was just, my experience at the school that I went to. But I will say it also has informed how I think about where I want to send my children. But I'll save that for a later question if we want to go there.
Yeah, absolutely. We've got a question from the audience, which I think actually kind of goes well into this, which is what environments foster creativity and what environments retard creativity? Does anyone have any immediate thoughts about that? Yeah, Dave.
Sure. I think so how do you learn to be creative? You make a lot of mistakes. You erase a lot of things. You basically, you fail a lot. And, Tracy talked about people said she was creative, but she just had courage to do something different. And so an environment that nurtures creativity for sure allows for departure from what seems to be right. So failure, we call it. So, because you got to do, how do you learn your skills? You make a lot of mistakes. You got to do a lot of that. And if every time you do it wrong, you're down on yourself, you'll never even get all the basics down. So you got to be willing to live with a lot of just junk and crap and oh, that's okay. That's okay. It's part of the process. But even, and I know that, but I don't always believe it or remember it. And, because if you are good at any craft, or not craft, but anything that's regular academics, and because you see the algorithm, how you're going to solve it. If you transfer that over to the creative world, it's death, because you can't always see it. And in fact, if it was seen, it'd be done. So you're given things that cannot be seen yet. So you cannot hope, you can't lay it on yourself that you're going to see it. And every step along the way, you're gonna bump into things because you're walking around in the dark. So you gotta forgive failure. That's one thing. I'm sure there are other ways to nurture creativity.
Yeah, Jun Ki, do you want to add?
Creativity people. There are people who study creativity itself. They talk about four things. The first is the place, the environment. Second is people. Third is process. The last is a product. And the first one is the environment, the place. It's good to have creative people around.
Yeah.
If you plant a seed, in the garden, the chance of that sprouting and bearing fruit is small. But if you plant 5, some of them or many of them will come to life. So it's better to have many people around, and risk taking you just talked about. And if somebody is successful, they should be challenged with more difficult problem or project. That's how the personal creativity grows. So they start with small creativity, small projects, medium size, big one. Some people want to have a big one the first time around. That happens very rarely. So just start small. So environment, it's not just a comfortable chair, nice music, paintings on the wall. That's good too. But your favorite music is not my favorite music, you know? They should be free to think and try different things and fail. That will prepare them for the success.
Thank you. Yeah. John.
So this is interesting because I don't think people have dealt with the fundamental paradox here that I totally agree that creativity is all about taking risks and failing over and over again. But on the other hand, the reason we value creative people is because they're fairly reliable that what they create is valuable, whether the item that Dave ultimately designs in his CAD/CAM system. And, you know, I am always imagining, when you talked about that, I imagined the little boxes that Dilbert always showed to the boss. But whatever it is, you know, as you said, people want it to work. And when I get up on the bandstand, people want to hear music that sounds good. So that's the paradox, because when it counts, you don't have all that freedom to fail. But on the other hand, you need that sort of mental space to let yourself almost let your mind free after you've trained it so well that when you let it free, it's more likely to go somewhere good. And one of the things that I see a lot as a tutor is fear disabling students. Because what I find is because they're so afraid, they actually fear creativity. So they try to do everything by rote. And they try to just memorize the formulas they're supposed to know and just parrot them on the test at the right place and hope that it works. And of course, that doesn't work very well because humans aren't that great at detail. So they forget little bits, or, you know, plus instead of times, and things fall apart. Whereas if you spent the time and given yourself the space to discover and creatively discover, not anything random, but something that is true, then it will sink in and it becomes more effortless to use that knowledge as you proceed. So it's, you know, the whole idea of failure is so crucial, but people want creative people to produce good stuff.
Bill,
John,
you have a question? Oh, go.
Sorry, I just wanted to add, I think you stated something super important there that I don't want to lose, which is knowledge is really important to being creative. You know, I think you can only be creative once you have a certain foundation of knowledge in an area. And that's what both gives confidence to your point about students lacking the confidence, as well as it gives you the freedom, right? Once you learn the chords, then you can go my goodness, my jazz music knowledge has just left the room. But, you know, that's where you can go riff on something, right? But you can't do that if you don't know the chords. And so I think that base of knowledge, to answer the question about what fosters creativity, you first have to learn your basics before you can move on to that. The only thing I just wanted to quickly add is I think the other thing that's sort of challenging and what retards creativity is the word fail. It's a scary word. Nobody wants to fail, right? And I think sometimes what I try to think about is win or learn, or get it right the first time, or learn rather than fail, just because failing is scary. And maybe if we just changed our language a little bit, maybe that could change our attitude towards it, towards not necessarily getting it right, but it's not necessarily failing either. But yeah, Bill, I would love to hear, following Christina's question here, thoughts on how this translates internationally, both in Europe and in China, especially.
China. Well, so what? Tell me, Anna. Oh, should I just go now like that? Because
Yeah,
I was gonna,
go for it.
oh yeah, what? No, I was. You know, when you were talking about this before about the two ambiances, right? I mean, I think that's what I understood. That where is there more of a creative ambience or opposed to another types of areas? I thought that was kind of interesting. I think you can be creative in any place, sure. I think that gives you the open room to do anything, because if it's kind of like the flower's in a thing called dirt, right? But what's around it's going to make it go good. You know what I mean? If you put a lot of good stuff in it, you might be doing something. If you're in a room and it's ice cold, right, and you're freezing, you're going to go down and you're going to get really creative and take the curtains off and put them around you. I think that in any situation you're going to find the area to be creative. If you were to do a drawing and you put your feet, take your shoes off in hot water and make a drawing, or if you was listen to hard grunge music, really hard rock music, things are going to happen differently. So I think that about the ambience, the environment, I think they're all creative. I really do. I think you're going to do something. And what was the next thing you were talking about? This intercultural teaching, was that the question?
Oh, so yeah, someone asked you, what do you think that these thoughts sort of hold true in Europe? And I think what she was talking about was when they were talking about like the education system here.
Well, I'll tell you right now, working in Europe for 36 years with the Italians, and I'm of Italian descent, okay, it's just amazing. You know, there's no order, but there's order. I mean, everything works and everything doesn't work magically. And that's the amazing thing. In Italy, somebody talks like this, somebody talks like this. At the very end, everybody understands everything. I don't know how it works. I can't figure it out. And when we're doing like on photo shoots with, you know, all kinds of people there, you know, actors and stuff like that on the stuff, right? Everybody gets involved in the jam session. I mean, even the guy just supposed to bring the shirts out, the costume guy, he starts raising his hand and starts screaming. It's an amazing thing. Here, it's very different. It's very categorical. I mean, you know, one guy's in charge of this. He knows his boundaries. He can't go over that. And if it was to say, where is it better? You know, I'll tell you, 38 years of being there. I grew up in Lexington. I was a little drummer boy in the parade. But I mean, I kind of like the European model because it's just kind of crazy. Everything's all over the walls. And now in China, this is my first intercultural experience. I have 50 students online twice every day. No, 2 days a week. And let me tell you, I'm learning more from them than they're learning from me, because it's just amazing what we talk about. I mean, you know, I said to my translator, I said, well, the first 15 minutes of the class, we want to have introductions. Everybody's going to get up and have like a minute or something to say who they are. And she says to me, no, we can't do that in China. I said, what do you mean? What do you mean we can't do? No, and it's just the ideas we're doing now with these kids in China, which is a boarding school in the middle of China, Shenzhen. I don't even know how to say the name, but it's about 7 hours from Beijing south, and the kids are like 17 years old. The stuff that's coming out is crazy. I mean, we're seeing stuff that I didn't even believe, because we're doing these. One girl is designing a flower that's made out of water. And they have to assign reasons why to all these elements, because I have a bunch of random 100 magic words that I put down in a chart form, and they have to choose these words and they have to analyze them and they have to make them work. And so the stuff that came off the ground was like this. She's doing a flower made out of water. Why? Because these are for hot countries. But anyway, I'm just saying that working interculturally, above and beyond Italy, that I love. I just love the way the Italians do it. The food is exceptional, but in China, I'm really surprised. I really am, and I'm just having a really great time there. It's the first time actually in this part of China we're doing creative thinking. And it's working really well. I'm just amazed. I think I'm learning more than them. I'm not going to tell them that, otherwise it's not going to pay the bill, but I'm just saying.
I think this sort of leads me to my next question, and fits in well, which is kind of a two-parter again. But do you think that creativity is something that can be taught? And if so, how do you teach someone to be creative?
Yeah, I definitely agree that it can be taught.
Yeah.
I think that this is kind of like a catch-22 thing. I think that, that there are kids out there that grow up curious and like to notice and observe. And there are kids like that. And they're out there. And those guys they're on automatic pilot. They can fling it out and they can make it happen. Lots of people, not a statistic, please don't hold it to me, but the ones that I'm noticing, they're not really that creative. I mean, I start my classes out saying, how many people are creative in here? And not one hand goes up. And because they don't really know how, I think. This is what I'm gathering. But they know, because a lot of kids have a lot of things going on in their heads. Everybody does. We got to worry about paying the girls' college. We have to go on the vacation. My mother's sick in here like this. And if you tell somebody to start creating with all these kinds of things going on, it's not all that easy. Because some of these analytical people, they think of that, they start getting out of the box, and all of a sudden and they go back. So my whole thing is to distract them, do distraction. I mean, they got a big web, you got to distract them. Because with all this energy and stuff that's going on, you finally hear that your father died, boom, you're out there. You're out, nothing else is important in the world. That's engagement. They're engaged, they're focused. And that's how I do it. I distract them with weird elements that makes them go crazy to think about it. So that's how I try to do it with my kids. And that's how I do it.
Wow. Yeah, John, please.
I do it all the time. That's kind of my job. To continue from what I was talking about before, I usually start with kids who are afraid of math and who are memorizing and who have tamped down their natural intelligence, not just their creativity, but even their natural intelligence, because they're in this abusive relationship with this subject. And I found out from one of my students, ironically, who was studying psychology, this thing called learned helplessness, which is something that happens in an abusive relationship. And this is what a lot of students in these supposedly non-creative courses like math feel. They feel it's all capricious and a bunch of rules, and they're thrown. Their job is to absorb more capricious crap from the authority every day and spout it out at the right time. And what I teach them is not to be creative, like write anything you feel like on the piece of paper, but to be creative in wondering, why does that work? Could I show myself why that works? I wonder sometimes even just paying attention to what it means, like looking at the symbols on the page as if they actually mean something. This thing actually is equal to that thing. I mean, just that fundamental knowledge makes people use their brains, their natural intelligence and creativity. Then they can figure out for themselves what to do, which is a form of creativity. And in musically, one of the things, I don't usually teach music, but one of the things I've learned myself, and I try to teach when I have improvising students, is once you've learned these fundamentals, one way to let go is just by focusing on love for your audience and just expressing the love. And it has, that sounds like it has nothing to do with notes and chords and rhythm and all that stuff. That's why that all has to be internalized. But then you just let it out and you free up your mind with its proper training, and sometimes magical things happen. I'm still working on that one. I'd like to be more reliable at producing something that sounds like love to the audience. That's one of the things I'm working on now.
I wish you were my math teacher. I was one of those kids that got the right answer, but I did it a different way, and so that I get deducted all these points. They'd be like, "No, you did it the wrong way." I'm like, "But it's fine. I wish you were mine." Yeah, Junki, what would you like to say?
I'd like to change the question. from what can you teach someone creativity?
Yeah.
The question is somewhat wrong. Everybody has a potential creativity.
Yeah.
For some, the creativity is actively working, but for others, creativity is sleeping. They have the creativity, but it's sleeping. You have to wake them up. We have to encourage it. And
Yeah.
everybody, look at the little baby. They're all creative. They have only like 10 words. They have no trouble not communicating with parents. But when they go to school, there are certain customs that we have to follow, and the creativity is sort of shut down. And only a few, something like 2%, few percent, maintain their creativity. But for others, creativity goes into deep sleep. And there are ways people talk about waking them up by well-defined process. So I've changed the question. How do I wake up the sleeping creativity?
Yeah.
So as a parent, oh, sorry, Dave.
Well, I was thinking this. I was thinking a similar sort of thing. Like everybody actually is creative. We're born creative, as Junki points out, and we are creative. And in fact, even people who say they're not creative, they're creating all day long. Now, and I don't think being creative is not necessarily creating from nothing. In fact, none of us create from nothing. We all create from something. We add a little something. In fact, that's what innovation is. It's not like invention, which is this thing didn't exist. It's kind of take a little of this and take a little of this and take a little of this, and then it's something new. Like the dot I put on that piece of wood, that was not an invention. That was innovation, right? So I think what Junki is saying is right. So you can wake up creativity in a certain area. Like if people are creative all day long with their kids, but they like don't feel like they're creative with their job because their job is accounting, you can wake it up there. Or you can give more space for more of it in a place, not just one idea. Like go for 50 ideas, and it's okay if many of them are crummy, because all we need is one good one. Like, so let's just go. So you give the permission, or there's process, like you don't know what to do. Well, what questions do we need to ask to give us more ideas? So I think waking it up, giving it space, and suggesting ways to incrementally pull it out, curate, and develop it is for sure teachable. For sure teachable.
I think
Tracy.
What's interesting is, so I'm a parent of 6-year-olds, and I see the curiosity. I hear it all day long. We're homeschooling our kids right now. Every other word, every other sentence in our house starts with mama, mama, and some question. And I hear that creativity. And John, you were saying, was it learned helplessness? I can see how learned helplessness is created, right? My daughter says to me, mama, and asks me some question, and I can either engage her or I can shut her down. And if I keep shutting her down, then she doesn't get the answer, right? So she's left unfulfilled, but she's also learned that mama gets upset when she asks questions. So she stops asking the questions, and now she's just learned to be helpless. And she just has accepted, like, okay, maybe it's just better for my relationship with my mom, or just to get through my day without my mom getting mad at me, to not ask questions, right? And I think that that's one way, not the only way, but that some of this creativity and this curiosity gets stifled. And I'll just say, as a parent of young kids, it's exhausting to foster it and to nurture it and to not shut it down. And it's probably why we're like approaching my bedtime right now as we're talking. But it's one of the many things I've learned in becoming a parent is, kids are so curious. And I still remember when my kid's pediatrician told me that by the time your kids are 2, they will have figured the world out. They just won't necessarily have the language to express it. And I was like, okay, sure, whatever, right? And now they're 6, and I'm like, oh, yeah, no, you have figured out the world. You're just still learning some of the constructs that we've created on top of it. But you see the world like with no ego, um, no baggage, right? And you just see things for what they are. And that's why you ask so many questions. And I see it now as a parent as my job not to stifle it, and so that they can continue to be creative. So it doesn't actually have to wake up, because it will have never gone to sleep if I'm semi doing my job.
I think I'm going to start winding the evening down a little bit, but I'm going to do that by asking you guys this question. So a big theme that's been coming up tonight is that creativity is something that is stifled and can be put to sleep. And I think it's work to continue being creative in your life. So I guess my question for you, sort of end this night on, is how do you keep your creativity alive? How do you keep yourself motivated to stay creative? Yes, Dave, please.
So the way I stay motivated, so in my world, I'm designing for people, right? And it's a human-centered design process. So the way I stay motivated when I'm like thinking about the work I have in front of me and or my problem, I say, but we're doing this for somebody else. Like, who are these people? Like, so you got to fall in love with the end user and care about them. And so that keeps me motivated. How do I keep the faith? I keep the faith in the process that happens to have worked for 30 some years for me and the people I'm working with and myself. So you gotta have faith in the process. Of course, when you're starting out, you gotta have faith in something else before you know that the process works. So those are the two things: the user and the process.
Oh, my mic wasn't on. I'm so sorry. I muted myself. I said, thank you. Yes, Junki, please.
Oh, I want to do two things every day. One is doing something good for someone else other than me, and exercise small creativity, at least one. Small, but big creative doesn't come every day, the small one. I'm not successful every day, but at least that's what I try.
Yeah.
Like finding a parking spot when it's a lot of cars. That's creativity. And there are people who got the COVID vaccination even though they didn't qualify. That is also creativity.
Amazing. Thank you. Yeah, John, please.
Wow, we're not naming names, I guess. So I don't know. So a big thing for me is I love the things I'm involved with. So just, Dave talked about love a little bit, and I love the music that I try to play. I love all my students. I love the subject matter that I'm teaching. And so with the subjects, like with music, with math, I just keep my curiosity going. And I keep, I now know the thing about the triangles, but many days I'm just saying, I've taught this topic, but I don't really get why this thing works. And I just kind of fake my way around it. Let me dig in. Let me see if I can figure it out on my own. And the figuring out to me is as creative as anything else. And then the big other thing is just to find ways to let myself free after all the practice. And the times I play music the best, the times I tutor the best, is when I'm almost, and actually this pianist that I play with a lot, Harvey Diamond, brilliant pianist, he tells me that at his best moments of improvising, he feels like he's left the premises. He's literally not there. There's no ego at all. Literally in his mind, not there. Sorry, I hate to misuse that word. But I haven't quite gotten there, but I aspire to it, to just let things flow. And again, that's all based on having all the vocabulary, or as much as possible. And that's, I guess that's the other side, the boring side, is, practicing scales, doing math problems, the kinds that my students do over and over again. Having the mechanics effortless so that when I let my mind free, it can go good places some of the time.
Okay. Tracy, Bill, do you have any thoughts? Oh, Bill, sorry. Continue. Sorry, you were muted.
I don't have any problem with this stuff, to tell you the truth, because I came out of the 70s, and that was a bad year, right? Everybody. And to tell you the truth, that I have a problem staying calm. After you do this for like 38 years, of doing this stuff, it just comes by automatic. Every time you go in the supermarket, something's going on. Every time you go in Dunkin' Donuts, there's just so much energy there. I have a problem staying calm. I can't even talk. I can't even talk correctly sometimes. But so I don't need any more stimulants. I need other stuff that's going to keep me back here, right? My fiance is a fitness trainer, and that's enough, because that keep me in line here. But if the question was to be like, how can you maintain stimulation? How can you maintain being creative in everyday life? I guess I work with Dr. Langer at Harvard. She's a psychologist, and we're doing these really cool training programs. And it's about noticing, I would suggest. I would say that, if you want to maintain some creativity, just notice everything. And you can see the world in a coffee cup. I mean, just even weird things. One suggestion I would say to maintain creativity is just focus on everything. Notice, observe, and all these. I think that's the key to it all. Yves Saint Laurent said it's the style not to be in style. Do things that are completely different, like Dave was saying, that all mistakes lead to adventures. Like even Dr. Langer says that at Harvard. It's like, and also John as well. Mistakes are amazing. We didn't know that. They didn't teach us that. They taught us mistakes were bad. You get slapped in the face. That's all. But my father, Italian. But so as far as being stimulated, I have not a problem with that. But that's because I've been doing it for 38 years. And
Practice.
Oh, practice, yeah, all kinds of, and plus in Italy, with all this stuff going on there, it really helped me out a lot to get out of my fear. I was scared to death when I first started doing this stuff and going to the meeting table. I would say an idea in Italy, and people would look at me and they'd laugh, but they weren't laughing at me. They were laughing because I didn't speak correctly the language, probably, but I didn't get it, and I used to take it personal. I used to sweat like crazy until some guy told me at the end of the meeting. He says, by the way, Bill, you're saying a lot of cool stuff. Just don't worry about what the other people say. And I did it, and I got over it. But boy, oh boy, that fear! Oh my God, that's a terrible thing. That really is ferocious. You can change it. Like even the kids in the class. If some guy he does something and it's really bad, it's really terrible, you can't tell him that. Otherwise, he's going to turn off and go. He's going to study mathematics. You know what I mean? I'm just saying, John. I'm not making that's not a joke. But what I'm trying to say is so that. Perpetual stimulation, just observation, look at every little thing. You just look inside of a coffee cup and look at it for about 20 minutes. You're going to see a movie inside of that. Leonardo da Vinci said, look at a wall, you can see wars and paintings and just in walls and stuff like that. So that's how I would say it. But as far as stimulation, I don't need anymore. I need other kinds of drugs right now.
Amazing. Tracy?
I'm sort of on the Bill side. I feel like stimulation and motivation is not where I struggle. It's actually figuring out where I want to focus my energy. And I think part of that is for me, I don't know, if I try to think back where that came from professionally in my career, Thomas Keller is a chef in California has all sorts of accolades. But the thing that really that got drilled into us when I was working there was this pursuit of excellence, this relentless pursuit of excellence, and that trickled down to everything, to cutting the carrots the same way, the exact same time, because that discipline, enables you to then go and do the creative stuff and to create something new. And So I think I just have this relentless pursuit of excellence. And to me, it's not about the destination. It's just about the journey. And it's not about trying to make things incrementally better, but it's trying to take a whole new perspective on how to improve an entire experience or a sector or an industry. And so I'm not going to say that I achieved that, but if you have these big lofty goals, it takes such a long time to get there that it's a marathon. So I'm just never going to finish it. And so that's, I guess, what keeps me motivated.
Thank you. I think what I've learned even from this evening is something Dr. Junke said, which is having creative people around you. I found it really hard. My creativity outlet is acting, and I haven't been in a play in a year. There's been online stuff, but I think even just talking with you guys tonight and listening to what you say, I feel that creative spark start going a little bit. And I think that's a nice reminder that connect with people. And that's a good way to get creativity flowing. On that note, I really want to thank the entire audience for tuning in. Thank you for being a part of Munroe Saturday Nights. And I want to thank these amazing panelists we had. We were so lucky to have them, and I just thoroughly enjoyed that conversation. So thank you so much. And thank you, everyone out there. I hope you enjoyed the evening and are feeling a little more creative. Goodbye.